Today we're here to talk with Donovan Dillon with Aezion, and we're going to be talking about the security behind Keep It Safe, the platform. So, Donovan, welcome, and I'm glad that you're here. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and the role of the company, and then I'll get into some questions about the security that you guys offer us.
Oh, Gerard, thank you. Really pleased to be here with you today, and we really appreciate the trust that Keep It Safe has placed in Aezion. My role with Aezion is to basically do what it takes to make sure that our teams have everything that they need to serve customers like you.
I like that. I like that. So one of the questions that I have is the security of the platform. And people are always asking me, well, is it secured? How is it that it is secured? And I guess my first question would be, I know this, that we have what's called 256-bit encryption. Can you tell me and the audience how that helps protect the data that we store with Keep It Safe?
Well, that's a great question. And 256-bit encryption is really the foundation of the security mechanism for the Keep It Safe software. The AES in 256, AES stands for Advanced Encryption System. It is a cryptographic technique to basically take information and really scramble it, for lack of a better word, okay, in a way that makes it almost impossible to unscramble unless you have what's called the key to be able to unlock that information. And the 256 bits really translates to this, okay? You basically have 2 to the 256 power, right, worth of options or ways to scramble that information. So it's extremely powerful.
So you talked about a key, and that's important. How many people have this key, or how does that key work? How do we know that the key is going to go into someone's hands by accident?
Well, that's a good question, right? There are basically two keys. This was called a private key, and there's a public key, okay? Private key is basically owned and controlled by the person who owns that information. The public key is something that the system makes available as the first part of that overall process. And you can trust 256-bit AES because these keys are not shared unless, for example, the person who owns that key, okay, somehow exposes that key to someone that they shouldn't.
I see. So one of the things that we've implemented with Keep It Saved is that we force the users to use multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. How is that helping us protect clients' data?
Multi-factor authentication is really critical. What it does is it provides a level of protection for a situation where the access to a system that's owned by an individual may be compromised. And what multi-factor authentication does is it basically identifies a separate channel for the system to confirm that the entity that is trying to access the system is actually the entity that should be accessing the system. So, for example, you may be logging into the Keep It Safe system through your laptop. Multi-factor authentication will send a message to another device that is associated with that account that is separate from the computer. And only the individual who has possession of that second device now has the opportunity to respond to the system and confirm the access. Only then will the system allow that access to proceed.
Excellent, excellent. And what about backups? Can you tell me about backup data here? One of the questions that I get when I'm out and about is, well, what about if the servers go down? And I understand we have backups situated, but can you explain that a little bit to us?
I sure can. There are multiple layers of backup that we have in our system. First of all, the data itself gets backed up on different servers, okay, in case the primary information, for example, gets corrupted. But the data that's being backed up is encrypted. That's at the storage level. Beyond that, our system is duplicated, right? We're within a data center we have information on a set of servers. Okay, if for some reason that information or the servers are not available, right, the system can fail over to another copy of that information to make sure that it's available. Beyond the data center level, we have multiple data centers. So if there happens to be an issue with data center A, the system has, again, another path to be able to gain access to that information that is backed up regularly in a secure, encrypted manner in a separate facility that is geographically separate from the primary facility.
Wonderful. Well, you speak a lot about encryption. Is the data that the users are putting in to keep it saved encrypted?
The data that users are putting in is encrypted in two ways. Data is encrypted, what they call in transit, meaning that as the data is being sent to the system, it is encrypted. And what that does is that prevents the information from being spied on the way to the server. Okay, and when the information is stored, it is now encrypted at rest, so that now that the data is persisted somewhere, it's also encrypted. And that what that does is that prevents someone who may have access to the physical server where the information is stored from being able to unauthorized access to that information.
Wonderful. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate that. One of the things that we did is we were looking for a company to help us build this product. And we didn't want this to be two guys in a garage only because of the amount of security and expertise that are involved. Can you tell me about the expertise that is involved in creating such a platform that may prevent just two people from inside a garage creating this platform?
Well, that's another great question. What we're talking about here is a pretty sophisticated system that has multiple layers. And so there's a range of expertise that really needs to come to play for all this to work. We were just talking about storing data and being able to have data stored in a way that is encrypted, protected, backed up, and reliably accessible. That's an engineering challenge. Okay, and the resources that are required to be able to build systems like that operate at scale, right, are usually not the kind of resources that you're going to find, in a garage, unless you're talking about Steve Wozniak. Okay, so that's one layer, right? Just understanding the whole encryption based systems and being able to put them in place. Beyond that, you now have networks, right? Because this data is sitting in servers in a data center. Okay, the access to those servers come across networks, right? The networks themselves are a part of an overall security framework, starting with firewalls that basically prevent unauthorized access to the endpoints that are stored in this data center. Okay, then you have on top of that, you have intrusion protection systems, right, that are constantly looking out for access to systems that are unauthorized, finding them, stopping them, okay? And again, that's another layer of sophistication, right, that requires another set of skills. Usually these are highly skilled individuals that have background in network technology, right, and network security based systems. Then there's, DDoS protection, right? And all these other technologies that are layered on top of the underlying AES stuff, the firewall, the IPS to give you a really robust platform. And then beyond that, right, there is governance techniques that starts with the people that we interview, right? And the background checks that we run before we hire anyone, the security training that we put in place, the qualification of the individuals for access to certain kinds of information, and setting up role-based access that limit their ability to even interact with systems that are outside of their scope, okay? And then even beyond that, there's another layer of protection that we have built into our overall framework that ensures that even though you have a device that's qualified and validated to access the system, and even though you have a role and permissions that allow you to access the system itself also checks to make sure that the data stays in the system, right? So, for example, we have mechanisms to be able to detect whether or not somebody has attached removable media to the device, which means that information might be copied to removable media and taken away, okay? There are systems that we have in place to track where data goes, okay? And to be able to set alarms, right? And to be able to allow individuals to go and audit who touched what, when they touched it, what they did with it. So what I'm describing is a multi-layered system that has one objective, is to keep your data safe, right? And we recognize that there is no way that you can provide the level of security that Keep It Safe needs with just any one of these. But each of them require different levels of skills that only a company like Aezion, and there are others like us, but we're not the only ones, but companies that have that range of skills are able to put all of that together and build a system that it accomplishes what you're looking for.
Very well done. So keep it saved. In order for them to keep the data saved, needs the type of expertise that Aezion provides.
Yes.
And based on the description you gave us, I could see that we might be able to build something, but it won't scale. And we might be able to build something, but we won't have the expertise that we need for various functions of the product. So very well done. And you were talking about the penetration. We're doing a penetration test. Can you tell us how that helps us and what it is?
A penetration test is really in the simplest way I can describe it is, everyone has blind sites. Everyone has blind spots, right? And even with the resources that we have and the tools that we have and the techniques that we have, okay, we want to make sure that we get security right. So what we do is we identify third parties whose jobs are to find vulnerabilities. And a penetration test is exactly that. We've identified qualified people and we've said, hey, we want you to break our system. We want you to find a way in. We want you to find the holes. We want you to penetrate them, and we want you to give us proof that you've actually penetrated them. And the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure that we have a safety net, that we are able to use the experience of others who are qualified to help find gaps that we may have missed. And we do that on a pretty regular basis because threats change. Systems are never static. They change. Their software updates, right? And because of these changes, there's the potential for new vulnerabilities to be introduced over time. So we have a regular process where we run penetration tests, right? We don't tell the companies that we're dealing with how to do their jobs. We tell them, just find the holes, right? And then they come back and they give us comprehensive reports on holes that they found, okay, how they were able to exploit it. And that gives us information for us to go back and remedy those holes. And then we go back and we do another test to confirm that those holes have in fact been plugged.
Wonderful. Well, this is very good information here. So let me ask you this. Is there anything that I am forgetting to ask that I should be asking? You know, there are things you know that you don't know, and there are things you don't know that you don't know. So I don't know what not to ask you. So let me throw that out to you.
Oh, good question. Good question. What I would add is this. Aezion has done this kind of thing for companies in multiple industries. We have a pretty significant number of healthcare clients and healthcare systems that we've built from the ground up. So we've had experience building these systems there. We've also done it in the fintech world, right? And finance is also a very important place as well. So that experience has really allowed us to be able to be confident that we understand how to build these systems. Now, what it's also done is it's also given us a perspective on what we build and how various users use it. And so one of the things that we have learned from that process is that user education is really important. Okay, you can build a system, you can harden a system, right? But most compromises of systems are not actually done because the hardware fails or because the security mechanism fails. Oftentimes, systems are breached because of social engineering, okay? Because scammers are smart, okay? They know that the easiest way into a system is to have a key, right? Which is username and passwords, right? And so what they do is they engineer schemes, right, to allow themselves to take advantage of people that are using the system in order to gain access to those credentials and then use it to compromise the system. What we've learned is that while it's good to have an internal process for educating customers, it's even better to have something that is really systematized. By that, we mean you've got a standard set of things that you're consistently reinforcing to customers and users of the system about passwords, about password strength, about password complexity, okay? Other things like ensuring that your policies have a fixed timeline for how long a password can be used and mandatory password changes, verifying each password to make sure that the length of the password, okay, meets the right criteria, motivating users not to reuse passwords, okay, period, or to reuse them, not to reuse them within a certain time frame, okay? And then on top of that, really giving scenarios that allow individuals to see how systems have been compromised and see how users have been tricked into allowing their systems to be compromised. And don't just do that once, do that regularly. Have a cadence where you may do a user certification maybe once a quarter, but every month or every week, if you can, you are providing additional information to reinforce the learnings. And then finally, you run mock scenarios where you literally are acting like an intruder and basically sending information to your users, trying to entice them to actually take the bait, okay, and to allow themselves to be compromised, and do those in very convincing ways. So it's not obvious, right? But you build a system that tries to trick users, and then you inform them, hey, by the way, you just fell for a phishing scam, okay? Those are all things that we've learned that if you practice those consistently, you can build a user base that is, one, aware of what their role is in keeping the system secure, okay, and also making them wiser to the ongoing threats that are out there, which are evolving threats. And so sticking with something that you did, 6 months ago and repeating that over and over, it's only a matter of time where it's going to become aged and it won't be reflecting new threats. So really having a dynamic system where you're consistently working with users of the system to make sure that they're aware, okay, and doing their part to complement 256-bit AES, okay, as well as this multi-factor authentication and these additional layers of protection. We found that if you do all of that, okay, that really keep it saved in the best position to provide a secure platform for you users.
Well, good. Well, thank you very much. That was a great conversation. Thank you for your time. And this was Gerard Ibarra with Keep It Saved and Donovan Dillon with Aezion. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard.